The neon lights of Virac 9 pierced through the perpetual smog, casting an eerie purple-blue glow across the evening market. Towering skyscrapers loomed overhead, their upper levels disappearing into the industrial haze that had become as much a part of the imperial city as its ancient foundations. In this place, humans were second-class citizens, at best tolerated for their utility, despised for their perceived inferiority. Eli wiped a layer of grime from his forehead, with an equally dirty rag, sighing as he surveyed the day's meager haul. Small mechanical parts, salvaged wires, and a handful of semi-functional circuit boards lay spread across his makeshift vendor stand. At 28, he had spent most of his life in this market scraping by as a mechanic and junk trader. His nimble fingers, permanently stained with machine oil, were his only real asset in a world that viewed humans as little more than cheap labor. Another day, another credit short, he mumbled to himself, carefully arranging his wares as the market's nocturnal activity intensified around him. The night market was where Virac 9 truly came alive, a chaotic symphony of alien languages, the sizzle of strange foods, cooking on open flames, and the constant bartering that defined commerce in the outer sectors. The aroma of synthetic spices and engine coolant mingled in the air as Eli's stomach growled in protest. He hadn't eaten since morning, saving his single protein roll for his evening meal. Such was life under the current, Emperor food-rationed, resources controlled, and humans pushed further into poverty with each passing cycle. A commotion several stalls down drew his attention. Harsh voices rose above the market's ambient noise, the distinctive guttural tones of Imperial guards berating someone. Eli instinctively lowered his head. Drawing the attention of the Empire's enforcers never ended well, especially not for humans. Filthy vagrant. This sector is for licensed vendors only. The guard's voice carried through the market alley, causing nearby conversations to falter momentarily before resuming at a more subdued volume. Curiosity got the better of him. Eli peered around his stall to glimpse a small, huddled figure surrounded by 3 black uniformed guards. The figure wore tattered robes that concealed most of its form, a deep hood shadowing its face. What struck Eli as unusual was the intensity of the guard's reaction to what appeared to be just another beggar. Virac 9 had plenty of those, and they were typically ignored rather than actively harassed. I said, "Move along." The lead guard shoved the hooded figure, who stumbled backward, into a vendor's display of mechanical components, sending parts clattering across the filthy ground. Something about the beggar's movements seemed oddly graceful, despite the situation almost deliberate. The shopkeeper, a 6-armed Krell, hissed in outrage. "You'll pay for that damaged scum!" The beggar seemed to shrink further into the ragged robes, a trembling hand emerging to gesture apologetically. Eli couldn't see the hand clearly from his position, but something about it caught the light strangely, a momentary golden gleam, quickly concealed again beneath the dirty fabric. Eli had always prided himself on minding his own business. Survival in Virac 9 demanded it. Yet, something about this scene pulled at him, perhaps the disproportionate aggression of the guards, or the strange dignity with which the beggar endured the abuse. Before he could reconsider, he found himself walking toward the confrontation. "She's with me," he heard himself say, the words leaving his mouth before his brain could properly evaluate the consequences. "My assistant just stepped away to use the sanitation facilities." The guards turned in unison, their visored helmets revealing nothing of the faces beneath. The tallest one stepped forward, looming over Eli. "Your assistant," the guard's voice dripped with skepticism. "Humans aren't permitted more than 1 vendor license." "She helps me carry stock," Eli improvised, forcing his voice to remain steady. "Perfectly legal under Imperial Labor Code Section 16, Paragraph 4. Unpaid assistance for physical tasks doesn't require additional licensing." The guard's hand moved to the neural baton at his belt. "You seem remarkably familiar with Imperial law for a junk peddler." "I make it my business to know how to stay in business," Eli replied, hoping the tremor in his voice wasn't noticeable. Behind the guards, the hooded figure had gone completely still, their posture somehow changing from cowering to alert observation. After what seemed like an eternity, the lead guard grunted. "Get this filth out of the main thoroughfare. Next time I see either of you where you shouldn't be, there won't be any conversation." He gestured to his companions, and the three moved away, their black uniforms soon swallowed by the market crowd. Eli exhaled slowly, only now realizing he'd been holding his breath. He turned to the beggar who hadn't moved. "You should probably come with me before they decide to circle back," he said quietly, not waiting for a response as he headed back to his stall. He felt, rather than saw, the figure follow moving, with an unexpected silence, for someone supposedly weak from hunger. Back at his small booth, Eli busied himself rearranging his meager wares, suddenly uncomfortable with his impulsive decision. The hooded figure stood just outside the pool of light, cast by his single flickering lamp, still and watchful. "You can sit if you want," Eli offered, gesturing to the small crate he sometimes used as a stool. "Not exactly luxury accommodations, but it's better than standing." A soft voice emerged from beneath the hood, speaking in perfect standard, with an accent Eli couldn't quite place, certainly not from the lower sectors. "Why did you interfere?" Eli shrugged, continuing to tinker with a small power converter to avoid making eye contact. "Those guards were being excessive even by Imperial standards. You knocked over some junk, not the Emperor's crown." A sound escaped from beneath the hood, something between a laugh and a gasp, quickly stifled. "Indeed, not the crown." The strange comment hung in the air between them. Eli glanced up, trying to catch a glimpse of the face hidden in shadow. "Are you hungry? I don't have much, but—" He reached into his pocket and pulled out his protein roll, his only meal for the day, and broke it in half, offering the larger portion to his unexpected guest. The figure hesitated, then reached out slowly. As slender fingers emerged from the ragged sleeve to accept the offering, Eli couldn't help but stare. The beggar's hand was nothing like he expected. Despite the dirt and grime, the skin had an unmistakable golden sheen to it, with faint patterns that seemed to shift beneath the surface, like circuits made of light. Definitely not human, but unlike any alien species he had encountered in Verac 9. The hooded figure quickly pulled the hand back food, and all retreating further into the shadows. "You notice too much," the voice observed quietly. "Occupational hazard," Eli replied, taking a bite of his own half of the roll. "When you fix things for a living, you develop an eye for details. And what else do you see fixer of broken things?" There was an undercurrent of something in the voice now, challenge perhaps, or evaluation. Eli chewed thoughtfully, studying the cloaked figure. "I see someone who doesn't belong in the lower markets. Your standard is too precise. You move differently than the sector folks. And those guards weren't just hassling a vagrant, they were looking for someone." The figure remained still for a long moment. Then, with a deliberate movement, slender fingers reached up to pull the hood back slightly, just enough to reveal the lower portion of a face that made Eli's breath catch. Golden skin with those same shifting patterns formed features of extraordinary alien beauty. Full lips curved into a cautious smile, revealing teeth with the slightest luminescent quality. When she spoke again, her voice had lost its affected roughness. "You have given me your food when you had little yourself. Now I shall give you something in return." She leaned forward slightly, her face still mostly concealed. "You, Eli the mechanic, will open the gate that a royal dynasty has lost." A chill ran down Eli's spine. "How do you know my name? I never told you." But the moment was shattered by a sudden commotion at the market's main entrance. Red emergency lights began to strobe across the formerly purple-blue haze, and the distinctive march of Imperial boots echoed down the corridor. "They're conducting a sector sweep," Eli hissed, recognizing the pattern of the alarm. "Someone important must be missing." He looked pointedly at his mysterious visitor, whose hood was now firmly back in place. Without another word, he began packing his most valuable components into a worn backpack. Years of living under Imperial rule had taught him when to run, and all his instincts were screaming now. To his surprise, the hooded figure moved with similar urgency, helping him secure his smaller items with quick, efficient movements. "Follow me," Eli whispered, as the sounds of the approaching patrol grew louder. "There's a maintenance tunnel behind the food stalls. If we're lucky, they won't have sealed it yet." Moving as casually as possible, Eli led his companion through the now anxious crowd, weaving between stalls, as vendors hurriedly secured their wares. Imperial sweeps often resulted in confiscations and arrests. No one wanted to draw attention. They had almost reached the service corridor when a spotlight swept over them from above. A mechanical voice boomed through an amplifier. "Halt, identify yourselves." Eli grabbed his companion's arm, abandoning all pretense of casual movement. "Run!" They sprinted down the narrow service passage, the sound of pursuing boots close behind. Eli's heart hammered in his chest as they rounded a corner, coming face to face with a rusted maintenance hatch set into the wall. "Help me with this," he gasped, grasping the corroded wheel lock. Together they strained against decades of disuse, until with a shriek of protesting metal, the wheel turned. The hatch swung open to reveal a dark tunnel beyond. "In," Eli urged, practically pushing his companion through, before following and pulling the hatch closed behind them. The wheel spun more easily from this side, locking with a satisfying clunk, just as the first guards rounded the corner. They stood in complete darkness, listening to the muffled shouts from the other side of the thick metal door. Eli fumbled in his pocket for a small light, illuminating a maintenance tunnel that stretched into darkness in both directions. "We should be safe for the moment," he whispered, trying to control his ragged breathing. "They'll need cutting tools to get through that hatch. Standard patrols don't carry them." In the dim light, he turned to his companion and froze. The hood had fallen back during their flight, revealing her face fully for the first time. She was unlike any alien he had ever seen. Her golden skin seemed to glow from within intricate patterns, flowing beneath the surface like liquid circuitry. Her eyes were the most startling feature, large almond-shaped and a deep violet that seemed to hold galaxies within them. Her hair, where it wasn't concealed by the remains of her hood, appeared to be composed of thousands of fine, iridescent strands that shifted color with every movement. She met his gaze unflinchingly, a strange mixture of wariness and relief in her expression. "I believe proper introductions are now necessary," she said, her voice melodic in the confined space. "My name is Serena. You're royal." Eli stammered, recognition dawning, as he connected ancient images from historical archives with the being before him. "Aurelian. But that's impossible. The royal family has been in power for centuries. They don't look like this," Serena gestured to her luminous skin. "What you know of the royal family is carefully constructed propaganda. What you see before you is the true form of Aurelian royalty, before the disguises, before the genetic modifications that allow them to appear more conventional." Eli's mind raced, trying to process this revelation. The ruling emperor and his court appeared in public as tall, imposing humanoids with pale blue skin, attractive but hardly remarkable by galactic standards. Nothing like the ethereal being standing before him. "If you're really royal, then why were Imperial guards hunting you? Why are you dressed as a beggar? Why?" A distant clang echoed through the tunnel, cutting off his questions. Serena's expression grew urgent. "We have much to discuss, but not here. These tunnels are not as forgotten as you might hope." She closed her eyes briefly, the patterns beneath her skin pulsing once brightly. When she looked at him again, her expression had hardened with determination. "Do you know these maintenance passages well?" Eli nodded slowly. "Well enough. They run throughout this sector, connecting to the old sublevels. Most are abandoned now. Then lead us deeper, mechanic, away from the surface. There are things I must show you, and time grows short." Every instinct told Eli to refuse to find his own escape route and disappear into the anonymity of Verac 9's underclass as he had done before when trouble arose. Yet something in those violet eyes held him a truth that demanded to be heard. "This way," he said, finally turning to head deeper into the maintenance network. "There's an old engineering hub 2 levels down. We should be able to talk safely there." As they moved through the dim passages, Eli couldn't shake the feeling that in helping this strange, beautiful alien, he had stepped onto a path from which there would be no return. The tunnels grew older as they descended, trading the utilitarian metal of the upper maintenance levels for ancient stone and crumbling concrete. Water dripped steadily from corroded pipes, and the air grew thick with the musty scent of abandonment. Their footsteps echoed softly despite their attempts at stealth, the sound seeming to carry into unknown depths. "These passages predate the Empire," Eli explained, as they navigated a particularly narrow section. When Virac 9 was first colonized, these were the main transportation arteries. After the third rebuilding, they were forgotten officially at least. "The underclasses never truly forget useful knowledge," Serena observed, ducking beneath a low-hanging cable. The ragged cloak she wore caught on a protruding piece of metal, tearing further. With a look of disgust, she pulled it free, and then shed the garment entirely, revealing a form-fitting bodysuit beneath. Though stained and worn in places, it was clearly of advanced design, with the same circuitry-like patterns that marked her skin embedded in the fabric. Eli tried not to stare, focusing instead on the path ahead. "The engineering hub should be just beyond this section. It used to be a junction point for the old power grid. Nobody comes down here anymore except scavengers like me." They emerged into a cavernous circular chamber, dominated by an enormous, silent turbine in its center. Defunct control panels lined the walls, their screens long dark. Faint emergency lighting provided just enough illumination to navigate by casting everything in a feeble red glow. "We should be safe here for a while," Eli said, setting his pack down on an ancient console. "Now I think you owe me some explanations." Serena walked slowly around the chamber, trailing her fingers along the dead machinery. The patterns beneath her skin seemed to respond to the technology, glowing more intensely wherever she touched metal. "What do you know of the current emperor?" she asked without turning. Eli shrugged. "Emperor Verax VIII. Ruled for about 20 years. Taxes too much, cares too little. The usual." "And his ascension to the throne. What do the history books tell of that?" "There was some kind of succession crisis after the previous emperor died without an heir. Civil unrest. Verax was a distant cousin who restored order." Eli frowned as he repeated the official history he'd learned in mandatory education. "Why?" Serena turned to face him, her violet eyes flashing. "Because that is a lie. Emperor Talassen the Wise did not die childless. He was assassinated, and his daughter, the rightful heir, was framed for the crime and forced to flee for her life." Eli's breath caught as understanding dawned. "You're Princess Serena Aurelia Talassen, rightful heir to the Aurelian throne," she confirmed, standing straighter. Even in her dirty bodysuit with her iridescent hair tangled, there was no denying the regal bearing that seemed to emanate from her very being. "And Verax is a usurper who has spent 20 years systematically dismantling everything my father built while hunting me throughout the galaxy." Eli sank onto a rusted chair, trying to process this revelation. "If what you're saying is true, why haven't you fought back? Why hide as a beggar in the lowest sector of your own capital?" "Because I need the crown of ascension to prove my claim," she replied, pacing now. "It's more than a symbol, it contains genetic markers that respond only to the true royal line. Without it, I would be just another pretender in the eyes of the court and the military. And this crown is what lost. Hidden." Serena stopped pacing, fixing him with an intense gaze. "My father, sensing the conspiracy against him, separated the crown into 3 components and concealed them throughout the ancient sections of Virac 9. He left clues that only his true heir would understand." A shadow passed across her luminous features. "Unfortunately, I was forced to flee before he could tell me all I needed to know. I've spent years gathering allies, staying one step ahead of Varex's assassins. And now you're back risking everything by returning to the capital." Eli studied her with new understanding. "You must have found something important." Serena nodded, something like hope flickering in her expression. "The first component and a map to the second. But Varex's spies are everywhere. I needed to move through the city undetected hence." She gestured to her previously concealed appearance. "But why tell me I'm nobody, just a human mechanic? What could I possibly do to help a princess reclaim her throne?" Serena moved toward him, kneeling gracefully, so they were at eye level. Up close, the complexity of the patterns beneath her skin was mesmerizing, like watching the universe's most intricate machinery in constant fluid motion. "Because you see what others miss, Eli." Her voice had softened. "You saw through my disguise when others saw only what they expected. And because you showed kindness when you had no reason to do so." She reached out her golden fingers, hovering just above his oil-stained hand. "But most importantly because my father's final message led me to you." "That's impossible," Eli protested. "I never met your father. I would have remembered meeting the Emperor." "Not directly to you," Serena clarified. "To the human mechanic with hands that speak to ancient tech, whose workshop sits where 3 sectors meet. That description led me to the night market, to the very spot where you found me." Eli shook his head in disbelief. "That could be dozens of people, hundreds even. And yet here we are." Serena finally allowed her fingers to touch his hand. The contact sent a strange, tingling sensation up his arm, as though microscopic electrical currents were dancing across his skin. "The prophecy said you would open the gate that the royal dynasty has lost. I believe you are the key to finding the remaining crown components." Before Eli could respond, a distant metallic clang echoed through the tunnels, followed by the unmistakable sound of marching feet. Serena rose in one fluid motion, instantly alert. "They've breached the upper levels," she whispered, moving toward one of the chamber's exits. "We need to move deeper." Eli grabbed his pack mine, still reeling from Serena's revelations. "There's a connection to the old city ruins through that passage," he said, pointing to a dark archway opposite from where the sounds originated. "But it's treacherous, collapsed in places." "It's our only option." Serena was already moving her form, seeming to gather what little light existed in the chamber. "Lead the way, Eli. Our journey has only just begun." As they plunged into the darkness beyond the archway, Eli couldn't shake the feeling that his life had irreversibly changed. For years, he had survived by keeping his head down, attracting no attention. Now, he was fleeing Imperial guards, alongside a princess who believed he was somehow crucial to restoring the rightful ruler to the throne. The passage narrowed quickly, forcing them to proceed in single file. Ancient stone gave way to something older, still massive blocks fitted together with such precision that not even centuries of neglect had separated them. The air grew colder, heavy with the weight of history. "These aren't maintenance tunnels anymore," Eli observed quietly, his small light casting long shadows ahead of them. "This is part of the original settlement before Virac was an imperial world." The first colony. Serena agreed from behind him. "My ancestors preserved these passages when they rebuilt the city. Few remember they exist." The tunnel opened suddenly into a vast underground chamber that Eli's light couldn't fully illuminate. The beam caught glimpses of towering pillars and ornate carvings on distant walls. "What is this place?" he whispered, his voice swallowed by the immensity of the space. Serena moved past him, raising her hand. The patterns beneath her skin brightened, casting a golden glow that spread outward, revealing more of their surroundings. They stood at the edge of what appeared to be an ancient temple or meeting hall, its ceiling lost in darkness above. Hundreds of columns carved with symbols Eli didn't recognize supported whatever structure lay overhead. "The Hall of Remembrance," Serena said, her voice filled with wonder. "I've seen it in historical archives, but I never thought—" She trailed off, moving deeper into the forest of columns. Eli followed, constantly glancing back toward the passage they'd emerged from. I don't think we were followed, but we shouldn't linger. No, this is exactly where we need to be. Serena moved with increasing purpose, examining the symbols on the columns they passed. The first component of the crown led me to this sector, and your market specifically. The data crystal inside it contained coordinates that make sense now. It wasn't pointing to a location on the surface, but here underground. They reached the center of the hall, where a circular platform rose slightly from the floor. Carved into its surface was a map of the ancient city, detailed with remarkable precision. Serena knelt beside it, her fingers tracing the intricate lines. Here, she said, pointing to a spot near the edge of the map. This is where we entered. And this, her finger moved to the center, where a small depression marred the otherwise perfect carving, is where the second component should be. Eli crouched beside her, examining the depression. It looks like something used to fit here. A key or a token of some kind. Yes, and I think I know what it is. Serena reached into a concealed pocket in her bodysuit and withdrew a small golden object that gleamed in the light emanating from her skin. It was roughly cylindrical, etched with patterns similar to those that flowed beneath her skin. The first component. She placed it carefully into the depression. It fit perfectly, but nothing happened. Serena frowned, pressing harder, then trying to turn it like a key. Still nothing. It should work, she muttered, frustration evident in her voice. The prophecy said, Let me see, Eli said, gently moving closer. Years of working with delicate machinery had taught him that force was rarely the answer. He examined the component and the depression without touching either, noting how the patterns on the golden object aligned, or rather didn't quite align with corresponding markings on the map. It's a frequency lock, he said finally. The patterns need to resonate at the same rate. He looked up at Serena. The markings on your skin, they fluctuate with your emotions, don't they? They were brightest when you were talking about your father. Serena looked surprised. Yes, our bioelectric field manifests visually through these patterns. How did you know? Because this lock works on the same principle. Eli pointed to the barely perceptible flow of energy in the etched lines. It's waiting for the right emotional key. Understanding dawned in Serena's eyes. She placed her hand over the component, closed her eyes, and appeared to concentrate deeply. The patterns beneath her skin pulsed slowly, at first, then with increasing tempo. Gradually, the etchings on the golden cylinder began to pulse in response, their rhythm synchronizing with Serena's own internal light. With a soft click, the cylinder rotated 90 degrees and sank deeper into the depression. A moment later, the entire circular platform began to descend slowly into the floor. A hidden chamber, Eli breathed as the platform carried them downward into darkness. Your father really didn't want anyone else finding this. The platform came to rest in a small octagonal room. Unlike the grand hall above, this space was intimate, its walls covered in what appeared to be writing in the same ancient script they'd seen on the columns. In the center stood a pedestal, and upon it rested a semicircular object that gleamed with the same golden light as the cylinder. The second component, Serena whispered, approaching it with reverence. As she reached for it, her eyes widened. There's something else here. Beside the crown component lay a small data crystal, similar to the one she'd mentioned earlier. Serena picked up both items, examining the crystal with intense focus. This contains the location of the final piece, she said. But we need a reader. Eli rummaged in his pack, producing a small, cobbled-together device. Will this work? It's basic, but it can read most crystal formats. Serena looked at him with new appreciation. You continue to surprise me, mechanic. She handed him the crystal, which he carefully inserted into his device. The small screen flickered to life, displaying a series of coordinates and what appeared to be a partial schematic of some kind of mechanical system. These coordinates, Eli frowned, studying the numbers. They're pointing to the Imperial Palace. Serena's expression hardened. Of course they are. My father would have hidden the final piece where it would be most protected, and most ironic for the usurper to be living right above it, never knowing. But how are we supposed to get into the most heavily guarded building in the galaxy? Eli asked, the impossibility of their task suddenly overwhelming. Serena held up the second crown component, fitting it against the first. They joined seamlessly, forming a larger arc of intricate golden metal. With these, we now have a key to the old royal passages tunnels that connect these ancient halls to the foundation of the palace itself. Her violet eyes gleamed with determination. And we won't be alone when we arrive. What do you mean? I have allies in the capital, people loyal to my father's memory, who have been waiting for my return. This, she pointed to the joined crown components, will send a signal that only they know how to detect. By the time we reach the palace, they'll be ready to move. The enormity of what was happening struck Eli like a physical blow. This wasn't just about helping a stranger escape some guards anymore. He was now involved in what amounted to a coup against the ruling emperor. I never signed up for a revolution, he said quietly. Serena studied him, her luminous features softening. No, you didn't. You signed up to help someone in need without thought of reward or consequence. That kind of compassion is rare in the Empire these days. She placed a hand on his shoulder, the touch once again sending that strange, pleasant tingling through his body. If you wish to leave now, I wouldn't blame you. You've already done more than I had any right to expect. Eli looked at the partial crown in her hands, then at the data crystal, still projecting its information. He thought about his life in the market, the daily struggle just to survive, the constant fear of Imperial patrols, the hopelessness that had become so normal he barely noticed it anymore. If what you're saying is true, he said slowly, then everything I know about the Empire is a lie. The oppression, the segregation of humans, the poverty, none of it had to be this way. Serena nodded solemnly. My father believed in equal rights for all species. Varrix's first acts as emperor were to dismantle those protections, blaming economic necessity, while he and his inner circle hoarded wealth. And if you succeed, what kind of ruler would you be? The question seemed to catch her off guard. For a moment the regal facade faltered, and Eli glimpsed vulnerability beneath. I would try to be the ruler my father raised me to be, she answered finally. Just compassionate, but also practical. 20 years of Varrix's rule can't be undone overnight. She met his gaze directly. I cannot promise utopia, Eli. Only that I would try to make things better. It was the honesty of her answer, more than anything else, that decided him. Then I'll help you get to the palace, he said. Not for any prophecy or destiny, but because it's the right thing to do. Relief and gratitude flickered across Serena's features. She pressed a button on the side of the pedestal, and the platform began to rise back toward the hall above. The passages to the palace begin on the far side of the Hall of Remembrance, she explained, as they ascended. If my calculations are correct, we can reach the palace foundations by morning. As they emerged into the vast columned space once more, a new sound reached them, distant but unmistakable. The low, pulsing wail of Imperial alarm sirens. They've expanded the search, Eli said, grimly instinctively, moving into the shadows between columns. We need to hurry. Together, they darted between the massive pillars heading for the far wall, where, according to Serena, the hidden passage to the palace waited. The golden glow of Serena's skin provided just enough light to navigate, by though she seemed to be deliberately dimming her natural luminescence. They had nearly reached the wall when movement flickered in Eli's peripheral vision. He froze, pulling Serena behind a broad column. What is it? She whispered. We're not alone, he breathed, peering carefully around the edge of the pillar. Shadows moved between the columns ahead, humanoid shapes in rigid formation. The distinctive black armor of Imperial shadow guards reflected dully in Serena's faint glow. How did they find us so quickly? Eli muttered. Serena's expression darkened. Traders in my father's court learned his secrets over the years. Varex must have known about these passages. Is there another way to the palace? Not that I know of, Serena admitted. We'll have to find a way past them. Eli studied the guards' pattern of movement, counting at least 6 that he could see. They were methodically searching the hall, moving in pairs between the columns. Their weapons, neural disruptors capable of rendering a target unconscious with a single shot, were held at the ready. I might be able to create a distraction, he whispered, reaching into his pack. I have some maintenance explosives. Nothing lethal, but enough to confuse them. Serena placed a restraining hand on his arm. Wait, I have a better idea. She closed her eyes, concentrating deeply. The patterns beneath her skin began to pulse rhythmically, growing brighter, despite her earlier attempts to dim them. The crown components. They're not just symbolic, they contain technologies from my ancestors. Before Eli could ask what she meant, the joined pieces of the crown in her hand began to emit a high-pitched tone, barely audible at first, but rapidly intensifying. The sound seemed to resonate with the very columns around them, setting up sympathetic vibrations that made the ancient stone hum. The shadow guards reacted immediately, clutching at their helmets as if in pain. Eli realized that the sound must be amplified inside their enclosed armor, disrupting whatever communication system they used. Now, Serena urged, pulling him forward. They sprinted between the disoriented guards, heading for a section of wall that looked no different from any other to Eli's eyes. When they reached it, Serena pressed the joined crown components against the stone. Patterns that had been invisible before began to glow in response, outlining a doorway. With a grinding sound, a section of the wall swung inward, revealing a dark passage beyond. Quickly! Serena pushed Eli through the opening, following close behind. As soon as they were through, she pressed the crown to a similar pattern on the inside of the door, causing it to swing shut again. The sounds of confusion from the hall were abruptly cut off, leaving them in silence. Eli leaned against the wall, heart pounding from their narrow escape. That was impressive. An old defense mechanism. Serena explained, her breathing only slightly elevated, despite their sprint. The crown components can interact with the ancient technologies built into Varak's foundations. That sound disrupts neural networks, particularly artificial ones, like those in Imperial armor. Useful trick, Eli commented, straightening up to examine their new surroundings. They stood in a narrow tunnel that curved gently away from them, its walls made of the same precisely fitted stone blocks as the hall they'd left behind. Unlike the maintenance tunnels, this passage was dry and surprisingly clean, as if it had been preserved against the ravages of time. Soft illumination sprang to life as they moved forward, triggered by some unseen mechanism responding to their presence. The light revealed elaborate carvings, running along the wall scenes, depicting the early days of the Aurelian dynasty, their arrival on Varak, and the building of the first settlements. My family's history, Serena observed, trailing her fingers along the images. From before we began hiding our true form. She pointed to a carving, showing Aurelians in their natural state, their bodies luminous with the same patterns that marked her skin, working alongside humans and other species to build the city above. Why did they hide? Eli asked, genuinely curious. Your natural form is, well, beautiful. A sad smile crossed Serena's face. Beauty can inspire fear as easily as admiration. As our empire expanded, including more worlds and species, there was resistance to being ruled by beings so visibly different. My ancestors chose adaptation over conflict, using genetic modifications to present a more conventional appearance. She sighed. Only within the royal family is the true form maintained, and even then, only in private. And if you reclaim the throne, will you rule as you are or continue the deception? Serena seemed to consider this carefully as they walked. I don't know, she admitted finally. Change must come gradually if it's to last. But perhaps it's time for truth to return to the Empire in more ways than one. They continued in thoughtful silence, the tunnel leading them steadily upward. After what felt like hours, they reached a junction where three passages converged. Serena consulted the data from the crystal, then pointed to the rightmost path. "This way. We're close to the palace foundations now." The tunnel grew narrower and steeper, forcing them to proceed more carefully. Eventually, it opened into a small chamber, with a vertical shaft rising above them. Ancient handholds were carved into the wall, forming a ladder of sorts. "Up there?" Eli asked, eyeing the shaft dubiously. Serena nodded. The palace was built on top of the original royal complex. This shaft should lead to a maintenance level beneath the main structure. From there, we'll need to find access to the throne room. That's where the final crown component will be. "Right under the usurper's nose," Eli muttered. "Your father had a sense of humor." Among other qualities, Serena agreed with a hint of a smile. She began to climb, moving with the same fluid grace that had caught Eli's attention in the market. Eli followed, grateful for years of climbing through maintenance shafts that had built his strength and agility. The ascent was long, and several times they had to rest on small ledges cut into the shaft wall. Finally, Serena reached the top, pushing against what appeared to be a heavy stone slab above her. With a grunt of effort, she managed to shift it slightly, creating a gap just wide enough to peer through. "We're clear," she whispered down to Eli. "Help me with this." Together, they pushed the slab aside, revealing a dimly lit chamber above. They emerged cautiously, finding themselves in what appeared to be an ancient storeroom, now abandoned. Dust-covered stone shelves and empty containers, suggesting it hadn't been used in decades, if not centuries. "The palace proper should be just above us," Serena said, examining the ceiling, where modern lighting fixtures had been installed, alongside the much older architecture. "We need to find a service lift or stairway." They moved quietly through the storeroom to a heavy metal door that looked significantly newer than its surroundings. Eli tested it cautiously, unlocked. He eased it open a fraction, peering into a brightly lit corridor beyond. "Modern service level," he reported in a whisper. "Automated maintenance droids. No human personnel that I can see. Palace staff would be minimal at this hour," Serena said, checking a small device on her wrist that Eli hadn't noticed before. "It's nearly dawn. The night shift would be ending, day shift not yet begun. Our best chance." They slipped into the corridor, moving quickly past storage units and machinery. Unlike the grand public areas of the palace above, this level was purely functional concrete floors, exposed conduits, and utilitarian lighting. They followed directional signs toward a bank of service elevators. "These should go all the way to the top levels," Eli noted, examining the control panel. "But they'll require authorization." Serena studied the security scanner thoughtfully. "The old royal overrides might still work. My father built redundancies into the palace systems." She pressed the joined crown components against the scanner. For a tense moment, nothing happened. Then, with a soft chime, the panel lit up green. "Security protocols recognized," announced a synthetic voice. "Welcome, House Aurelian." The elevator doors slid open, silently revealing an empty car. They stepped inside quickly, and Serena pressed the button for the highest level accessible. "The throne room is at the top of the central spire," she explained, as the elevator began its smooth ascent. "If my father's message is correct, the final component is hidden within the throne itself." "And Varix never found it?" Eli asked skeptically. "The throne is ancient, built with technologies even my people no longer fully understand. Without the first two components to guide him, Varix would have no way of knowing what was hidden inside." A grim smile touched her lips. "He's been sitting on the key to his own downfall all these years." The elevator slowed, then stopped. A quiet chime announced their arrival, and the doors opened onto a sumptuously decorated hallway. Rich, crimson carpets covered the floor, and the walls were paneled in some sort of lustrous material that seemed to shift colors as they moved past. Ornate sconces provided warm, golden light, and the air carried the faint scent of exotic flowers. "The royal residence level," Serena whispered, tension evident in her posture. The throne room is through the grand hall ahead. They moved cautiously down the hallway, alert for any sign of guards or palace staff. Strangely, they encountered no one. The silence was unnerving after their long journey through the noisy tunnels. "Something's not right," Eli murmured as they approached a set of massive double doors inlaid with precious metals and gemstones. "Where is everyone?" Serena's eyes narrowed, the patterns beneath her skin pulsing with increasing intensity. "It could be a trap. Or they could be expecting you," Eli suggested. "You said you had allies in the palace." Before Serena could respond, the ornate doors swung open silently before them, revealing the throne room beyond. The vast chamber was dimly lit with towering windows, currently covered by heavy drapes that blocked the early morning light. At the far end, atop a dais of polished stone, stood the imperial throne, a massive construction of metal and crystal that seemed to draw what little light existed in the room. And seated upon it was a figure. "Ah, the prodigal princess returns at last," called a smooth, cultured voice. "How kind of you to deliver yourself and the missing crown components directly to me." Lights blazed to life around the throne, revealing a tall, aristocratic alien with pale blue skin and sharp features. Emperor Verex wore formal robes of state, his posture relaxed and confident as he regarded them with cold amusement. Flanking him on either side stood at least a dozen shadow guards, their neural disruptors, aimed squarely at Serena and Eli. "Verex," Serena hissed, her body tensing, like a predator preparing to strike. "My dear niece," he replied with mock affection. "You've led us on quite a chase these past 20 years. Though I must admit I expected better from Talassan's daughter than to trust your fate to a human junk peddler." His gaze shifted dismissively to Eli. "How did you know we were coming?" Serena demanded, her hands clenching around the partial crown she carried. A cold smile spread across Verex's face. "Did you really think you were the only one who could decode your father's messages? I've had decades to study his methods, his secret passages." He gestured languidly to the shadow guards. "My men have been tracking you since you entered the Hall of Remembrance." Eli's mind raced, trying to make sense of the situation. If Verex had known they were coming all along, why allow them to reach the throne room? Why not capture them in the tunnels? The answer came to him in a flash of understanding. "The crown," he whispered to Serena. "He needed you to bring the components. He couldn't find the third piece without them." Verex's smile widened, confirming Eli's suspicion. "Clever human. Indeed, my dear niece has saved me considerable effort by retrieving the first two components. Now, she will complete her service to the Empire by turning them over to me." "Never!" Serena snarled, the patterns beneath her skin flaring with anger. "They respond only to true Aurelian royalty, to my genetic signature." "A technicality I've spent 20 years working to overcome," Verex replied, rising from the throne. As he stepped into the brighter light, Eli noticed something strange about the Emperor's appearance. Beneath the blue skin, faint patterns were visible, crude approximations of the luminous circuitry that marked Serena's true form. "You've been trying to modify yourself," Eli realized aloud. "To mimic Aurelian physiology." "More than mimic," Verex corrected sharply. "To perfect it. The old royal line was weak, sentimental, wasting their genetic gifts on peace treaties and trade agreements." He gestured to his own body. "I have been enhancing myself, becoming what the Aurelians were meant to be. With the crown complete, I will attain the full power of the Ancient Ones." Serena's laughter, sharp and disbelieving, echoed through the throne room. "You understand nothing, Verex. The crown isn't a source of power. It's a verification of legitimacy. It can't make you something you're not." "We shall see." Verex nodded to the shadow guards. "Take the components from her. Kill the human if he resists." The guards moved forward in perfect synchronization. Eli tensed, ready to fight despite the hopelessness of their situation. But Serena placed a restraining hand on his arm, her eyes never leaving Verex. "The crown chooses," she said, her voice suddenly formal, resonant. She raised the joined components above her head. "By right of blood and birthright, I call upon the ancient pact." The partial crown began to glow, pulsing in harmony with the patterns beneath her skin. A high-pitched tone, similar to the one that had disrupted the guards in the ancient hall, but purer, filled the chamber. The shadow guards faltered their movements, becoming uncoordinated as their neural networks were affected. Varex's expression contorted with rage. "Stop her!" But it was too late. The throne itself had begun to respond, sections of its ornate structure sliding apart to reveal a hidden compartment. From within rose a third golden piece, the final component of the crown of ascension. The room filled with blinding light as the component separated itself from the throne and floated through the air toward Serena. The guards who tried to intercept it were thrown backward by an invisible force, their weapons clattering uselessly to the floor. Serena caught the final piece in her free hand, her violet eyes blazing with triumph. The crown recognizes its rightful heir. With a fluid motion, she brought the three components together. They joined seamlessly, forming a complete circlet of intricate gleaming metal. The light emanating from it was almost painful to look at, directly filling the vast chamber and throwing the increasingly frantic shadow guards into sharp relief. Varex staggered back, shielding his eyes. "This changes nothing. The military remains loyal to me." "Are you certain of that?" Serena challenged, advancing toward the throne, with the completed crown held before her. "Even now, my allies move throughout the palace and the capital. The truth of your usurpation is being broadcast across the empire. How loyal will your generals be when they learn you've been lying to them for 20 years? As if to confirm her words, alarms began to sound throughout the palace. Distant sounds of combat reached them, even through the thick walls of the throne room. Varex's composure finally cracked completely. With a howl of rage, he drew a concealed weapon from his robes, not a standard neural disruptor, but something older and far more deadly. A pulse weapon illegal throughout the civilized galaxy for its capacity to completely destabilize organic matter. "If I cannot have the throne, then neither shall you," he screamed, aiming directly at Serena's heart. Eli reacted without thinking. He threw himself forward, knocking Serena aside as Varex fired. The pulse weapon discharged with a sound like reality, tearing the energy blast, grazing Eli's shoulder instead of striking Serena. Even that glancing blow sent white-hot pain shooting through his body, dropping him to his knees with a strangled cry. Serena recovered instantly, her expression transforming from shock to cold fury. She raised the completed crown, which now blazed with energy, and spoke a single word in an ancient language Eli didn't recognize. The effect was immediate and devastating. The crown released a pulse of golden light that spread outward in a perfect sphere. When it reached Varex, he screamed a sound of pure agony as the false Aurelian patterns beneath his skin began to dissolve, revealing the true nature of his modified body. The Shadow Guards fared no better, their armor systems overloading and cascading failures. They collapsed like puppets with cut strings twitching on the ornate floor. In the sudden silence that followed, Serena rushed to Eli's side, cradling his injured form. "Why did you do that?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "That pulse weapon could have killed you." Eli managed a pained smile. "Seemed like the right thing to do," he gasped. "Can't let the galaxy's best hope die right before her coronation." The throne room doors burst open again, but this time the figures who entered wore the distinctive white and gold of the old Royal Guard uniforms that had been banned under Varex's rule. "Princess." Their leader rushed forward, dropping to one knee before Serena. "The palace is secured. The generals have pledged their loyalty to you upon seeing the crown. Varex's inner circle is being arrested as we speak." Serena acknowledged him with a regal nod, but her attention remained on Eli. "This man needs medical attention immediately," she commanded. "Royal physicians only." Two guards gently lifted Eli, careful of his injured shoulder. Through the haze of pain, he saw Serena rise to her full height, the completed crown now resting on her brow. In that moment, with the golden light of dawn finally breaking through the throne room windows to illuminate her true form, she looked every inch the ruler she was born to be. "Your Highness," the guard captain said urgently. The people await. News of your return has spread throughout the capital. They've gathered in the Grand Plaza. Serena hesitated, glancing at Eli as he was being carried away. Go with them, he urged weakly. They need to see their true empress. For a moment the regal mask slipped, and he saw uncertainty in her violet eyes. Then she squared her shoulders and nodded. Take care of him, she instructed the medical team. I will come to you as soon as I can. As consciousness began to fade, the last thing Eli saw was Serena standing before the throne, bathed in morning light, the patterns beneath her skin glowing with a brilliance that seemed to promise a new dawn for the entire galaxy. The recovery took longer than Eli expected. The pulse weapon had done damage beyond the physical, disrupting the bioelectric field of his nervous system in ways that required specialized treatment. For 3 weeks he drifted in and out of awareness in a private medical chamber somewhere within the palace complex. In his lucid moments, he caught glimpses of the changes sweeping through Virac 9 broadcasts, showing massive crowds celebrating in the streets, imperial decrees being publicly burned, and the distinctive golden glow of Serena, addressing her people from the palace balcony, no longer hiding her true form. On the 22nd day, he woke fully alert. For the first time, the pain finally reduced to a dull ache. The medical chamber was empty, save for a single attendant, monitoring his vital signs, a human woman in a uniform he didn't recognize, bearing a golden insignia. "Where am I?" he asked, his voice rough from disuse. The attendant smiled warmly. "The Royal Medical Wing, sir. Her Imperial Majesty had you transferred here after the liberation." "The Empress, is she?" "Ruling, sir. Quite effectively by all accounts." The attendant checked his readings, nodding with satisfaction. "She visits when state duties permit, though you've usually been asleep. I'll inform her that you're awake." "No, don't disturb her," Eli protested weakly. "She must have more important things to do than check on a junk trader." The attendant looked at him strangely. "Sir, you are the liberation hero. The entire empire knows your name." Before Eli could process this bewildering statement, the doors to the chamber slid open. 2 royal guards entered, followed by Serena herself. She wore formal attire, now a gown that seemed woven from light itself, shifting through colors with her movements. The crown of ascension rested on her brow, now seeming a natural extension of the patterns that flowed beneath her golden skin. But despite the regal appearance, her expression as she saw him awake was one of simple relief. "Leave us," she commanded softly, and the attendant and guards withdrew immediately. "Your Majesty." Eli attempted to sit up straighter, wincing at the movement. "I didn't expect—" "Stop," Serena interrupted, approaching his bedside. "In this room at least, I am just Serena." She sat gracefully in the chair beside his bed. "How are you feeling?" "Better," he replied honestly. "Confused about a lot of things. The attendant called me a liberation hero." A smile touched Serena's lips. "The people needed symbols of the new era. You became one of them, the human who helped the true empress reclaim her throne. It makes for a compelling narrative." Her expression sobered. "Though few know the full truth of what happened in those tunnels, or how close we came to failure." "And Varix?" "Imprisoned along with his closest supporters. The genetic modifications he subjected himself to were unstable. He won't live much longer." She shook her head. "I offered him treatment, but he refused. Pride to the end." Eli nodded slowly, absorbing this information. "And what happens now to the Empire? To—" He hesitated, unsure how to ask about his own future. Serena seemed to understand the unspoken question. "The Empire is changing day by day. I've rescinded the anti-human laws and established a council with representatives from all species. There is resistance from some quarters, of course, but the revelation of Varix's deception created an opportunity for real change." She leaned forward slightly. "As for you, once you're fully recovered, I hoped you might consider a position in the new government." Eli blinked in surprise. "Me? I'm a mechanic, not a politician." "You're a man who sees what others miss," Serena countered. who understands both technology and people. The kind of perspective I need as we rebuild." She paused, then added more softly, "Unless you wish to return to your former life. That choice would be respected with my gratitude, and considerable compensation, of course." The thought of returning to his tiny stall in the night market seemed impossible now, like trying to step back into a life that belonged to someone else. Yet the idea of joining the imperial government, of navigating political waters he'd spent his life avoiding, was equally daunting. "I'm not sure I'm qualified for government work," he said slowly. "But if there's some way I could be useful, perhaps in infrastructure or technology restoration." Serena's expression brightened. "The ancient systems beneath the city, the ones we traveled through, they contain technologies we barely understand. With the right team led by someone who has both technical skill and first-hand experience with those passages." She let the suggestion hang in the air between them. It was an elegant solution, a role that would use his abilities without forcing him into court politics. A chance to do meaningful work rebuilding, rather than merely surviving. "I'd be honored," he said simply. Serena rose, her regal bearing, returning now that the practicalities were settled. From a fold in her gown, she withdrew a small object that caught the light with a familiar golden gleam. "Then accept this as both recognition of what you've done and authorization for what you will do." She placed it in his hand, a medallion, bearing the same intricate patterns as the crown of ascension suspended from a chain of some lightweight metal he didn't recognize. "This identifies you as the keeper of ancient technologies, answerable only to the throne itself." Her formal tone softened slightly. "And as a friend of the Empress, welcome in the palace whenever you wish." Eli closed his fingers around the medallion, feeling a faint resonance from the patterns etched into its surface, a distant echo of the energy that flowed beneath Serena's skin. "Thank you," he said, finding the simple words inadequate but sincere. Serena moved toward the door, then paused, looking back at him with an expression that combined the wisdom of her royal heritage with something more personal. "My father's prophecy said you would open the gate that the royal dynasty has lost." "I thought it referred to the physical passages to finding the crown." A smile touched her lips. "But perhaps it meant something more, opening the way to a new understanding between our peoples, a gate to a future where humans and Aurelians and all the species of the galaxy might stand as equals." With that thought hanging in the air between them, she departed, leaving Eli to contemplate a future far brighter than any he could have imagined when he shared his meager meal with a dirty beggar in the night market of Verac 9. In the months that followed, as he worked to uncover and restore the ancient technologies beneath the city, Eli often thought about that moment in the market, the simple choice to show kindness to a stranger. How easily he might have looked away, minded his own business, survived another day in anonymous poverty. Instead, that one small act had changed everything, not just for him, but for an entire galaxy. As the patterns on his medallion caught the light from the newly excavated Hall of Remembrance, he smiled at the thought that sometimes the greatest revolutions begin not with weapons or armies, but with a single act of compassion. The ancient recordings they discovered in the deepest chambers told of the early days of Verac, when Aurelians first arrived and built their kingdom alongside humans and other species as partners rather than subjects. Under Empress Serena's guidance, those old alliances were being reborn, the rigid hierarchies of the empire gradually giving way to something new, and yet, in many ways, something very old indeed. And at the heart of it all was the lesson Eli carried with him from those first moments, that when you help someone who seems to have nothing, you never know if you might be aiding the person who will change everything.